Please consider these examples. First, a client constructs a contract with a psychologist. As agreed, if the client consumes one alcoholic drink, she will punish herself by running 500 metres. Second, assisted by a mediator, a divorced couple agree that if either shouts at the other person in front of their children, they'll lose 1 hour of custody. And third, two friends both construct a contract. If one friend does not study an hour each night, this person must help the other friend collect data for an assignment. These examples represent a principle called behavioural contracts, sometimes referred to as contingency contracts or performance contracts. Behavioural contracts have been utilised to change a variety of behaviours. For example, these contracts might be used to motivate individuals to lose weight, abstain from unhealthy substances, live a healthier lifestyle, study harder, or cooperate more effectively. In essence, a behavioural contract usually comprises 4 features. First, the contract is usually written down. Second, the contract is usually an agreement between 2 or occasionally more parties. Third, the contract specifies the behaviours that one or both parties plan to implement. And finally, the contract specifies the consequences that one or both parties will experience if they do or do not enact this behaviour. To reinforce this notion, I'd like you to develop a behavioural contract for your lecturers. That is, list the behaviours you would like one or more lecturers to implement in the future, such as to provide feedback on assignments within 2 weeks. Next, specify the consequences these lecturers should experience if they do or do not implement these behaviours. Perhaps you should be granted the right to submit the assignments late next week if they do not provide feedback on time. Now, you're welcome to send these contracts to your lecturer, but you might not receive the response that you want. So, what content does an effective behavioural contract entail? Well, first, you need to specify the target behaviours, the behaviours the person should undertake, and the undesirable behaviours, the behaviours the person should not undertake, or both, as precisely as possible. Ideally, you should specify behaviours that demand effort rather than skill. For example, the behaviour might be to study 2 hours a night, a behaviour that demands effort, instead of the behaviour to receive a credit, a behaviour that demands skill. You should also specify the time frame over which these behaviours should be implemented, such as over the next 2 weeks. Second, you need to specify how you will measure these behaviours as objectively as possible. Otherwise, the parties might conflict on whether the behaviour was implemented or not. This measure, for example, might include the product of some act, such as the notes someone recorded while studying to prove they were studying. Indeed, people often believe they implemented some behaviour they didn't actually implement at all. For example, suppose the target behaviour is to act more politely. The person might believe that he behaved more politely than usual when actually he didn't. And that's because the intention of people to act politely can bias their memory of how they actually behaved. Third, you need to specify when these behaviours should be implemented, called the SD, as well as when these behaviours should not be implemented, called the S delta. Almost no behaviour is appropriate in all circumstances. For example, according to some studies, people should not even be too conscientious and diligent in all circumstances. That is, people are more satisfied in life if they're sometimes conscientious, but sometimes more lethargic or unmotivated. Fourth, you need to specify which reinforcements or punishments should be dispensed, as well as how often. Should desirable behaviours be reinforced each time? Should undesirable behaviours be punished or merely ignored? So to illustrate, to ensure the behaviour is sustainable, desirable behaviours should be reinforced intermittently rather than each time, because intermittent reinforcement is not as vulnerable to extinction. Fifth, you need to decide who will dispense the reinforcement and punishment, such as the psychologist, spouse, parent, or some other party. Finally, all parties, such as the client and psychologist, should sign the document. The precise details partly depend on the type of contract you construct. That is, these contracts can be subdivided into three types: one-party contracts, two-party parallel contracts, and two-party quid pro quo contracts. One-party contracts are designed to change the behaviour of one person or party. To illustrate, consider this contract. An employee constructs a contract with a manager. As agreed, if the employee arrives on time every day for a month, he will be assigned the room with a window. In this instance, the contract is designed to change the behaviour of one person, the employee. The contract is not really designed to change the behaviour of anyone else, such as the manager. Hence, this example illustrates a one-party contract. In contrast, consider this contract. Two feuding employees construct a contract with the support of their manager. If each person disturbs the other individual, this person must contact more clients than usual to receive a bonus that week. Now, in this instance, the contract is designed to change the behaviour of both employees. So hence, this example is a two-party rather than one-party contract. Now, more specifically, this example illustrates a two-party parallel contract. Parallel because the consequences that one person experiences don't really affect the other person. That is, the punishment that one person receives, needing to contact more clients to receive a bonus, doesn't really affect the second person. In essence, you can conceptualize this two-party contract as really two one-party contracts operating in parallel or simultaneously. Finally, consider this example. An employee wants his manager to desist from monitoring him closely. The manager will agree to this change provided the employee completes his work on time. Now, to achieve this goal, the employee constructs a contract with his manager. As agreed, if the employee completes his work on time, the manager will not monitor his performance as closely. Now, in this instance, the behaviour of one person, the manager, is the reward the second person receives if he implements the desired behaviour. So whenever the behaviour of one person is the reinforcement for a behaviour of the other person, the contract is called a two-party quid pro quo. But why are these one-party and two-party behavioural contracts effective? Well, several theories can explain the benefits of behavioural contracts. First, plans and intentions, once written, are more salient or prominent in the minds of people. And salient plans and intentions, that is, more prominent plans and intentions, are more likely to guide the behaviour of individuals. They're more likely to affect behaviour. That is, these plans and intentions are thus more likely to be implemented. Second, individuals like to be perceived as people who fulfil their promises. So, after individuals publicly commit to some action, they're more likely to implement this action in the future. They don't want to deviate from their promises. And third, individuals often bias the memory of the goals and plans they set in the past to align with the behaviours they implement. So, for example, consider a few students who plan to study 8 hours a week. If these individuals actually study for only 5 hours a week, they'll often maintain their goal was actually only to study merely 5 hours. That is, people often replace their original goal with a goal that matches their actual behaviour. Now, of course, a written contract could prevent this bias. Specifically, if individuals construct a contract, they can't convince themselves they achieve their goals erroneously. They hence feel more accountable and thus become more likely to fulfil their objectives.